Today I want to talk about Oklahoma State, and what the hell is going on in the Big 12, and all that's coming up after the bumper.
Don't be cornering me. Hold up. Time. You gotta help me with that corner shit.
What's up, kid folk? It's RJ Young. I am not on a step mill. Consider hitting the like and subscribe button because I upload a video every single day. It's always college football related, sports related. We have a good time. Today, I want to talk about the Big 12 championship race, as we saw some moving and some shaking on Saturday. And let's start with the big news I thought out of yesterday, which is that Texas beat Oklahoma State 41-34. Oklahoma State was ranked the number 6 team in the country according to the Associated Press. It was their first loss of the season, and at home to a Texas team that lost in quadruple overtime to Oklahoma on a neutral site. The same Oklahoma that took back-to-back losses to Kansas State and Iowa State. Same Kansas State that lost to West Virginia. Yeah, that West Virginia. 4-2 West Virginia. 37-10 in Morgantown as the number 16 team in the country. That's 2 top 25 upsets in one day in the Big 12 with the 10-team conference. And then we're looking at Iowa State, who beat the hell out of Kansas 52-22, but who hasn't beaten Kansas? I mean, they're 0-6, and they're not going to be very good in the first place. And then you add to that, they lose their star running back in Puka Williams Jr., who decides to opt out. Now, getting back to Texas and Oklahoma State, Spencer Sanders and Chuba Hubbard and Tylan Wallace outplayed everybody offensively at Texas. Spencer Sanders goes 27 of 39, 400 yards, 4 touchdowns. Chuba Hubbard goes 25 carries, 72 yards, about 2.6 yards per carry. Tylan Wallace goes 11 catches, 187 yards, 2 touchdowns. They still lose this game by a touchdown. Why? Because they cannot take care of the football. Texas had 4 takeaways in this game, in which Joseph Asai was absolutely unconscious. The best game he's ever played in his life at Texas. 12 tackles, like 7 for loss, like 3 sacks, just out there running roughshod over that Oklahoma State offensive line that was dropping like flies. But I also thought that Oklahoma State's defense was so good. I mean, we're talking about a Sam Ehlinger who had thrown for like 152 yards in 4 quarters of football. If there are not some takeaways and big plays and a return kick and all the ways you can give up points, if you're Oklahoma State, you don't lose this football game. As it stands, not only did Texas get a win against a top 10 opponent, they're back in the top 25 with this win. Kansas State is not the same football team that it was to start the season, not even when it lost to Arkansas State at home, definitely not when it beat Oklahoma. Skylar Thompson's out. Will Howard does not look like that guy. Jarrett Dagey, 22 of 34, 301 yards, 2 touchdowns. Letty Brown, 24 carries, 102 yards, 1 TD. Last week I said Breece Hall would be the offensive player of the year in the Big 12. He ended it today. Letty Brown says, hey, RJ, have you taken a look at what I have done at West Virginia? I'm actually the offense. And he is, right? Also get Bryce Ford Wheaton, who had 3 catches for 104 yards as West Virginia rolled in that game. Iowa State still getting great play out of Brock Purdy. Not the same sort of production that he had last year, but 23 of 34 for 239, 2 TDs. That's a good day. Breece Hall continues to destroy. Back-to-back games with more than 180 yards rushing. 21 carries, 185 for 2 TDs in that one against Kansas. You got Xavier Hutchinson finally coming on, 5 catches, 87 yards, and a TD. Texas Christian beats Baylor, but Baylor's so awful. They had both of their star tailbacks opt out. Both are seniors. Both were single-digit numbers, which means that they were, leaders on the football team. Now there's no Treston Ebner, right? There's no John Lovett. So you're looking at Charlie Brewer having to do it himself. 17 of 37 for 203, not great. 2 TDs. Darwin Barlow for Texas Christian goes 16 carries for 117 yards and a tutty. Quentin Johnson, the dude that had flipped commitment from Texas to TCU, as a 4-star recruit, 3 catches, 64 yards, and a 33-23 win for Texas Christian. Then Oklahoma dropped 62 on Texas Tech in Lubbock as the 24th ranked team in the country, moves to 4-2 on the year, 3-2 in the Big 12. Texas Tech falls to 1-4 in the Big 12. But what's wild about Texas Tech is that last week they beat West Virginia with the same quarterback that threw 2 interceptions to Trey Norwood last night. And then you get the return of both Ronnie Perkins and Rhamondre Stevenson to go along with Spencer Rattler going 20 of 30 for 288 yards with 2 tutties. Rhamondre Stevenson goes 13 carries, 87 yards, 3 tutties, and then 5 catches for 105 yards for Theo Weiss. And we have Oklahoma fans that are really litigating whether or not OU would be 5-0 if Ronnie Perkins had been playing and Rhamondre Stevenson had been playing from week 1. It's an interesting discussion, not because I think that they would be undefeated, but because you could hear Lincoln Riley allude to what we saw against Texas Tech in the lead up to the game against Texas Christian. He said, look, we're not where we want to be, but I know where we're going and I know how good this team can be. He attributes a lot of what they're still learning about the team to what everybody's still learning about their teams. Philip Montgomery said this about his Tulsa team Friday night. I feel like I'm still learning these guys, and we're damn near into November because they've had games that at Tulsa have been rescheduled and they've had to push back. And at Oklahoma, you've had COVID outings. You've had preseason camp that was started and stopped. You didn't know when your season was going to start. When you did get your season to start, you understood that we got to make this happen. You've had to move the practices around because of weather and because of COVID restrictions and because of how the school is trying to keep the place safe. But then you go down to Lubbock and you drop 62 on Texas Tech, including 35 through the midway mark of the second quarter and 48 in the first half, while holding Texas Tech to 14 in that half. If they were this kind of football team from the jump, it's worth wondering whether or not they would have lost to Kansas State and Iowa State. But they weren't this kind of football team from the jump. It does speak to how important I think it is that you have as many of your guys available to you as you can, especially in a year where nobody has their full assortment of players. We're talking about Clemson losing what many people believe is the best player in college football. I think that that's Justin Fields, but you could take a 1A, 1B conversation with it. Either way, you lost Trevor Lawrence. What do they have? DJ Uiagalelei. He's really good. They have Travis Etienne, who's also really good. But they also started the season without Justin Ross, who they knew they weren't going to have after, you need to have back surgery. And then you're talking about losing 3 starters on the defense in James Skalski, in Mike Jones, and in Tyler Davis. So I think that's attributable to every team right now, right? And I think Oklahoma does best when they're not in that top 5 light, when they're not a top 3 team, when nobody expects them to be up there with Clemson, Alabama, and Ohio State. They're just not ready for that right now. Now, I think in 2021, it's coming for them, and they need to be ready for it mature-wise as much as anything else, because they're going to be talented enough and experienced enough to chase a national championship. Same thing goes to 2022. And if you can get the bulk of your players back for next year, in this year where the NCAA has said everybody's got a mulligan, you could get a Rhamondre Stevenson who at present wants to return to Oklahoma. Now, if he goes gangbusters the rest of the season and his draft stock jumps him into the first round, that's a different conversation. You all understand that, I think. But I think what we were able to see from Lincoln Riley and Oklahoma is what the team could look like. Now, get Trajan Bridges back and get him back before Oklahoma State, and you got a chance to play in the Big 12 championship, because we're looking at this thing, man, and there's 1-4-2 or 1-3-2 team in Oklahoma, right? You got another 3-2 team in Texas. You got 3-1 team at Oklahoma State, 4-1 Kansas State, 3-2 West Virginia, 4-1 Iowa State. So we still have lots of moving and shaking here, and we still don't know who's going to be in the Big 12 championship. We just know that everybody not named Baylor, not named Kansas, and not named Texas Tech are out. So that's what? 7 teams that are still vying for 2 spots. This conference is wild, even as it's not going to play in a college football playoff this year. All right, that's it for me. Deuces.